Call this meeting to order. To the June 14th, 2023 regular meeting of the Schertz Planning and Zoning Commission. Item 1 was to call the meeting to order. Item number 2, seat an alternate. Have Commissioner Carbone with us this evening. Item 3, hearing of residents. Residents who choose, this time is set aside for any person who wishes to address the Planning and Zoning Commission. Each person should fill out the speaker's register. Prior to the meeting, presentation should be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Discussion by the commission of any item not on the agenda shall be limited to statements of specific factual information given in response to any inquiry, recitation of the existing policy in response to any, and/or a proposal to place the item on a future agenda. Presiding officer during the hearing of residents portion of the agenda will call on those persons who have signed up to speak in the order they have registered. And once again, I think most of you have probably been through this before. You are not required to sign up for the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting. If you have signed up for residents to be heard, certainly welcome to address us at that time. And again, at the public hearing if you so choose. First on the list is Richard House. Did I get that right? Okay.
I'm not on? We'll start over again? Okay. My name is Richard Moss, 3434 Wimbledon Drive. I've lived there for 32 years. When I attended college, I was a math major. During that time, I became interested in aviation. I obtained my pilot's license, 2 FA licenses to work on most fixed rotary airplanes, worked for a major airline for 39 years. One of the first things instilled in all aircraft technicians is that all required tasks and paperwork must be done correctly before the aircraft is returned to service. This can be a very difficult task sometimes and can sometimes require creative solutions. Out-of-service airplanes for a major airline cost between $10,000 and $30,000 an hour depending on aircraft type. I've owned homes, duplexes, townhouses, etc., and I've been a realtor. And I'm looking at PLP DTD 2023-0093. And the documents that I gave you refers to the UDC PDD code. And it talks about a PDD should not be used to deviate from the provisions of this UDC in a way that contradicts its intent. And then under development standards, it says all PDD applications shall list all requested variances from the standard requirements set forth throughout the UDC. Application without this list will be considered incomplete. The PDD that I just mentioned does not have a list. I've discussed this with Ms. Delgado and with Mr. Benson, and both of them understand that, but I don't know what the resolution is going to be for that. I have given you documents that clearly show that they don't have that. If you look at that 35-page document we're talking about for the PDD, there's 3 issues on here that are variances. They only list 1. And then one of those variances is not permitted to have a variance to start with. So this document should never have gotten through application. And what I'm asking for is that you table this document until it is corrected, because I don't know how you can look at a document that is not correct and then have any kind of a basic discussion about it. That to me, and like I said, I've already talked to the city about it, and I've already talked to Mr. Benson about it. So, and they both had opportunities to table it today instead of bringing it on. Now it's up to you what to do with this. I guess that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Maureen Moss? Bill Edmonds?
Bill Edmonds, 4909 Crestwood Drive, Schertz. Personally, I am not against having this development. The only thing is I want it to follow the codes, which it does not. If they bring everything into you and submit it as a uniform development code states has to be done, then we would not be against it. But the way it is now, there's too many variances, one that isn't even allowed to them to do, not allowed for you to change it. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Is it Waynette Dome? Get that right? Close enough?
Yes, Waynette Dolan, 3401 Columbia. I also am speaking as the same situation. I don't agree with this change, and I wish to see the builder follow the current minimum lot size as written in the Schertz UDC. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, that is the residents to be heard. Item number 4 is the consent agenda. We have 2 items on that agenda this evening. 4A is the minutes from the May 24, 2023 regular meeting. Item 4B is PLFP 2023-0140. Consider an act upon a request for approval of a final plat for the Carmel Ranch subdivision, approximately 40-acre tract of land located approximately 4,000 feet east of the intersection of Lower Seguin Road and FM 1518, City of Schertz, Bear County. Commissioners, do either of those items need to be pulled for discussion? If not, can I have may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Goldick. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Ray. No discussion on consent agenda items. Please record your vote. All right, it appears everyone has voted. Can we publish the vote? We have 6 ayes, none opposed. That motion carries. At this time, I'm going to exercise some privilege, and we're going to skip the public hearing and go to item 6A. We'll come back to the public hearing. Item 6A, items for individual consideration. 6A is PLPP. 2023-0073, consider an act upon a request for approval of a preliminary plat of the FM 1518 Schertz multifamily apartments, approximately 15 acres of land generally located 2,200 feet southeast of the intersection of Lower Seguin Road and FM 1518, parcel ID 309999, City of Schertz, Bear County, Texas.
PLPP 2023-0073, FM 1518 Apartments, preliminary plat. Amers Gomez, planner. The property being presented is outlined in green. To the north here is Lower Seguin Road. Here is FM 1518 North, and right across is the Crossvine subdivision. Here is the preliminary plat. Preliminary plat proposed to plat approximately 15 acres of land, establishing a 300-unit multifamily apartment complex that will consist of 8 apartment buildings, 1 clubhouse, a maintenance and laundry building, The site is currently Zone Plan Development District, PDD. The property will have 2 access points. The first will be the main entrance from 1518, which is here. The second will be the emergency access that goes from FM 1518 to the adjacent property to the east through a 26-foot wide emergency access easement. The proposed FM 1518 apartments will be serviced by the City of Schertz for water and sewer, Cibolo Creek Municipal Authority, CCMA for sewer, CPS, Spectrum, and AT&T. Planning has received a TxDOT letter of no objection to the plat. There is a 0.7 acre variable width for a right-of-way dedication that is proposed along FM 1518. The proposed preliminary plat complies with all relevant ordinances and regulations and has been reviewed by the Planning, Engineering, Public Works, and Fire Department with no objections. Staff recommends approval of PLPP 2023-0073, FM 1518, Schertz Multifamily Apartments Preliminary Plat as presented.
Very well, thank you. Commissioners, questions or comments?
Yes, question over here, staff. Excuse me. Can you show and describe that secondary access?
Yes, so the access is going to be right here. So here's the entrance, and then the emergency access is through here.
So does it access to another street or path or road, or where does it go to?
So it's the adjacent property.
So for now, it goes nowhere.
Yes.
And I was going to ask Mr.
We'll
Former.
have,
Go ahead.
the representative is here, so he can answer that.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. Raymond Thaddean with MTR Engineers, with the civil engineer on the project. So there are actually going to be 3 points of access for the property. There is the main and primary access, which lines up with Longleaf, which is the entry to Crossvine. There's the emergency access easement, which was just being pointed out, which connects over to the right on the property. I'm not sure how to use the pointer on this, but essentially to where she was just outlining along the easement. And there's also a second or emergency access on the frontage of 1518 that is on the north end of the property, so closest to the left-hand side of the sheet as we're looking at it. It's going to be a closed access. It's for emergency access only. TxDOT has allowed it, and it's permitted as part of the review of the project.
Thank you. That answer your question, Commissioner Rowe?
From a fire standpoint, how does that work? The third access you mentioned, if a fire truck wants to get in there, they bust through the gate, or they open a gate, or how does that work?
So, right, so they've got, so any of the gates that are on the property have to have a Knox box or a key located on there, right? The actual property that we're developing as the apartments here, those 2 access points meet the fire code requirements for the property. The third access point, which is the one that's going to the adjacent property, is actually to allow for future connectivity with emergency access to whoever develops next to the property.
And that's typically how it works, Commissioner. You have one that pops into my mind, Arroyo Verde. Go up there, that's a secured gate with a fire department lock on it. We have used that once. The other one up here on Live Oak Road, never remember the name of it, right up there past the church, is the same way. There's emergency egress, ingress from the property into the back area of the church property. That's secured with a gate and a fire department lock. That's
Sure about the one that accesses 1518, the one that accessed the adjacent property for future development. I wasn't too sure about that one.
Thank you for pointing
I'm
that
good.
out, yes.
I'm good, thanks.
I just wanted to know, so how far off of 1518 is the entrance gate?
So just keep in mind, when we start talking about the entrance gate and the emergency access, those are really site plan related questions. They're not, the entrance gate's not gonna be shown on the plat. It has access onto 1518 that's been reviewed by TxDOT. We've gotten the no objection from TxDOT, so really that's not a plat comment. That would be reviewed during the site plan process. That's okay. He's asking how far from the property. Yeah.
Okay, and real quick, at the last meeting, we talked about using all this electronic stuff, and we decided to just go with the electronic vote. And I also requested if, to make things easier for me, if you'd like to speak, if there's that RTS button on your little keypad, that gives me an indication, helps me a little bit better about keeping track of who wants to talk. Anyone else? Anything else? All right, this is an action item for the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I will entertain a motion to approve or deny or table. I put my glasses. ELPPP 2023-0073. Commissioner Bro?
I move that we approve the preliminary plat for PLPPP 2023-0073 as it's presented.
Okay, I have a motion to approve as submitted from Commissioner Bro. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Goldick? Any further discussion? All right, please record your votes. All right, we have 6 votes. Please publish that vote. And we have 6 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. All right. Back to item 5 is public hearing. Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing related to zone change requests and replats within this agenda. Public hearing will be open to receive a report from staff, the applicant, the adjoining property owners affected by the applicant's request, and any other interested persons. On completion, the public hearing will be closed. The commission will discuss and consider the application and may request additional information from staff or the applicant if required. After deliberation, the commission is asked to consider and act upon the following requests. Make a recommendation to the city council if necessary. Item A is LPDD 2023-0093. Hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request to rezone approximately 25 acres of land from pre-development district to planned development district, generally located at approximately 2,200 feet southeast of the intersection of Country Club Boulevard and IH-35 Access Road, also known as a portion of Comal County, property identification number 377261, and Guadalupe County property identification 63833, City of Schertz, Comal County, and Guadalupe County, Texas. Emily, again, before we get started here, let me go through the process again. Start with a presentation from staff. I'm assuming the applicant would, after that, we'll have a presentation by the applicant. They're done, I will open it up for public comment. I've been asked during the, and we've done it in the past, and I went back through our rules and regulations. Nothing in there that even addresses ceding your time to somebody else. So we won't do that this evening. The rules do give me some flexibility in how long you get to speak. So my intent this evening, we get to your input, is we'll start the timer and it'll go off at 3 minutes, and then we'll assess from there. All right, Emily, go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is for PL-PDD 2023-0093, a 25-acre zone change from pre-development district PRE to plan development district PDD, known as the Villas at Blue Bonnet Ridge. Emily Delgado, Planning Manager. So the subject property here is outlined in green. You can see Country Club and Columbia shown as well, as long as I-35 up to the top of the subject property map. This is the public hearing notice map, so just so everyone's aware what this map identifies, the blue is the subject property and the red identifies all the property owners that are within the 200-foot state law noticing requirement. On June 1st, staff mailed 117 public hearing mailers to the property owners within that 200-foot buffer. 3 public hearing signs were placed on the property on June 2nd. And then as of June 14th today at 5 p.m., we've received 1 in favor, 23 opposed, 0 neutral, and then 1 that was undetermined. And then right before the meeting, we did receive 1 more, 1 neutral response as well. So here is the zoning exhibit. It's approximately 25 acres, currently zoned pre-development district. PRE was previously a portion of the North Cliff Golf Course, is undeveloped, and they are requesting a planned development district, PDD, with a base zoning of 2-family residential district, R3, with the intentions to construct duplexes. So the proposed development would consist of a gated community that is HOA maintained, 85 duplexes with no more than 170 units. Each unit will be between 1,300 square feet and 1,400 square feet, and they're also proposing 7.31 acres of green space and amenities. So this is the dimensional requirements table that you can find within the Villas at Blue Bonnet Ridge PDD. So there's 3 items that I would like to point out first, that they are requesting to reduce the lot size dimensions. The first one you'll see there is the area per the UDC is 9,000 square feet. The PDD is requesting to reduce that to 5,655. The lot width, they're requesting to reduce to 65 feet, and the depth, they're requesting to reduce to 87 feet. The other item to note here is that each lot will have a 10-foot side setback on one side and a 0 lot line setback on the opposite side. And then one additional item that I would like to point out, per a conversation with the applicant this morning, the 75% impervious coverage listed that's within the packet is an error. The applicant is not requesting a modification to the impervious coverage percentage, and all future PDD design standards documents will reflect 60%, which is what the Unified Development Code does stipulate. So this is their general concept site plan showing their amenities. So they are proposing 7.31 acres of green space and amenities to include a pavilion, playground for the community, a concrete walking path, mail center, covered pavilion, a 0.56 acre fenced in private dog park, a 1.95 acre private picnic trail, community garden area, and then one item that is listed in the PDD as well is a 4.01 acre public walking trail contingent on LCRA approval to develop within the overhead electric easement that's shown as number 6 here, that kind of strip green. They are proposing to construct that public walking trail contingent on LCRA's approval. So a portion of the PDD does mention firewalls. So the PDD states, due to the reduced side yard setbacks, each duplex within the Villas at Blue Bonnet Ridge will require all AC condensers to be in the rear yard and exterior sidewalls to be at least a minimum of a 1-hour fire rating. No structures, including sheds, will be permitted within the side yard setbacks. Fencing shall be in line with the rear wall of the home, and then the fire rating shall extend the full length of both sidewalls and include any projections. It'll be acceptable fire rated standard per code. So this was written into the PDD as a way to help mitigate some fire concerns by having that 10-foot and 0-foot, 0 lot line proposal. This would essentially have both side walls be a 1-hour fire rating with including any projections that are proposed in that sidewall, and then have the fencing and the sheds not be in that side yard to leave those side yards unobstructed. Parking. Each 3-bedroom unit has 2 driveway parking spaces in addition to 2 garage parking spaces for a total of 4 spaces per unit. There are proposed 170 units, as previously mentioned, with 4 spaces. That's a total of 680 off-street parking spaces. In addition to those spaces, there are an additional 16 split between the interior parks and mail station, and an additional 76 spaces available on street to use as overflow and guest parking. And then just as a reminder, the current UDC, as amended by 23S07 earlier this year, requires that duplexes provide 2 parking spaces per unit. The UDC does not require additional guest parking for duplexes. So under the current UDC, the villas at Bluebonnet Ridge would be required to have 370 parking spaces. And you can see in that paragraph above, they are exceeding that requirement. So here is their proposed master plan showing the potential duplexes, the open space areas, the several amenities. So as we're all aware, this property, this project has come before the P&Z and City Council several times, so I wanted to kind of go through the history and how this current proposal is different. So in 2022, the applicant submitted a zone change for a PDD, but with a base zoning of multifamily apartments R4. That original proposal was for 220 units that would be developed as 4plexes. Ultimately, that application was denied by City Council as it was unable to obtain that supermajority required. Earlier this year, a new proposal was presented for a PDD with a base zoning of townhome district. That proposal was for a maximum of 51 buildings with no more than 198 units, and then ultimately that PDD was denied in April, again because the supermajority could not be met. So changes, kind of just bullet points of that. The first proposal, base zoning of apartment multifamily, 220 units as 4plexes. The second proposal, townhomes, no more than 198 units. And then the current proposal with a base zoning of 2-family residential with a maximum of 170 units across 85 duplexes. So it is a decreased maximum number of units from the first 2 proposals and a change in that product type. First was 4plexes and then townhomes, and then this product type that's being proposed is for duplexes. So the Schertz sector plan identifies the subject property as single-family residential, which encourages a mixture of residential housing types. The proposed PDD with the base zoning of 2-family residential, which allows for duplexes, would provide for a housing type that is not currently in the area. Additionally, the change to duplexes is in line with the discussion that occurred at the previous City Council meetings to reduce that overall density. And then the current proposal accommodates an area for the dedication and construction of that walking trail within the LCRA easement, which was identified on the last proposal as being desired by staff and at previous City Council meetings during trail presentations. So the Planning Division, Engineering Department, Public Works, and Fire Departments have all reviewed the Villas at Bluebonnet Ridge PDD design standards with no objections, and staff recommends approval of the proposed zone change to Plan Development District as shown here tonight, with the modification that all futures design standards would reflect the 60%, not the error of 75%.
All right. Emily? An address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Buck Benson, 2000 Broadway, for the applicant. I think most everybody on the commission has heard me speak before. I'll try to be brief. Staff did a great job of outlining the history and the request. A couple of high-level points I wanted to make is, I know density has been a hot topic in terms of this case. Right now, we are proposing 85 lots with a maximum of 170 units. I think in all likelihood, we'll probably lose at least 2 to 4 units, just because, I mean, this is on paper, and anytime you go to lay it out, you're going to probably lose some. But we are capped at 85 lots, which would allow up to 170. But again, I think we're going to ultimately come down a few units when we get everything designed. The price point on these duplexes, we're estimating $550,000 to $600,000. You know, as staff pointed out, the level of amenity package is fairly significant, with, you know, pavilion, inside dog trail, inside walking path. Again, every lot in this development is going to be subject to an HOA. It's going to be a member of an HOA like you would envision in most of the other single-family communities around here. Therefore, you'll have governance of the outside of the structures. People can't go and erect outbuildings or paint their buildings without getting ACC approval if that ever becomes an issue. The other thing that's important with that is that these streets within this development are going to be private. Therefore, the residents within that community, the owners within that community, are going to be responsible for the maintenance of those streets long term. So this is, fairly high-end development with an HOA that's going to have fairly expensive or fairly high assessments to account for all those costs. I know. I think in the end, with the kind of the twists and turns to get here in terms of this submission, I think this is a superior design and going to be a superior product to what we may have originally proposed, and we're kind of happy that it's worked itself into that. We have been meeting with the HOAs in the area. We haven't come to a resolution with all of them by any means, but we have been meeting with them and tried to address some of the concerns that they have. But I mean, ultimately, this is a difficult property to develop. I mean, it was a former golf course, or I don't know how many holes, 3 or 4 holes. It was, I mean, it wasn't planned to be a development. So we're working within the confines of a very just difficult piece to develop, just based on its elevation, shapes, and sizes, and therefore a PDD is needed in this specific instance. I think when you read staff's report, I think it outlines all the work we've done with Schertz staff just to get to this point in terms of meeting with building and fire to look at this project before we even kind of submitted it and got to this point. I think we've attempted to address those concerns. I really don't have much else to add, but I appreciate y'all listening to me and would ask and respectfully ask that you follow staff's recommendation and recommend approval of this zoning request to your city council. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So before I open it up for public comment, once again, anyone wishing to address, you have to sign up. Anyone wishing to address the commission, step forward. Do ask for your name and address for the record, and speak into the microphone so everyone can hear you. Again, typically limit your comment to 3 minutes. That's what the timer will indicate. We'll kind of play that, go flexible, kind of play that by ear. Okay? All right, so it is 6:32 p.m. and I'll open up for public comments.
Phil Jackson, 3410 Wimbledon Drive. You're going to hear from some people some more specific details of their concerns. And I thought it was important that we bring back to the forefront our main concerns, the base concerns that we have as a community with this development. One of the primary is the density issue. We have a plot of land that is a long, skinny piece of land. It's difficult to fit things into that piece without making adjustments. 170 units, that's a lot of vehicles coming through, 700 parking spots. The traffic, in order to get back to 1103, the only outlet to 1103 is through our neighborhood, and that is a difficult piece. Another piece that we have concerns with is the circumventing of the UDC. With the lot sizes having a minimum requirement of 120, being asked for those lot sizes to be 87 feet, that's a significant drop in lot size. If the UDC were followed, and if this council recommended that UDC be followed and those numbers be followed, we'd be talking about 108 units in that same spot instead of 170. And I know we've talked about this with the developer, and we understand they're looking at a profit margin. They're looking at a money. We're looking at appropriateness to our neighborhood. And in this instance, bringing this in between all of our homes and cramming that density in, and with the traffic issues that we have, all of those things together, we feel that at this time this is not appropriate for our neighborhood. So I just wanted to bring those to the forefront. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Heather Jackson. I live at 3410 Wimbledon Drive. Thank you for volunteering your time to serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I appreciate you listening to our thoughts and concerns this evening. My family and I have lived in the area for about 13 years. We love living in Schertz. Our boys are thriving at school, we love the community, and we feel very fortunate to call Schertz home. Our little Northcliffe corner of Schertz is one of the main factors contributing to our positive experience. It's a quiet, special community of people who truly care. Tonight, we are facing a proposal for 170 duplexes to be built in the middle of our single-family neighborhood. I have many of the same concerns I had previously with the fourplex and townhome proposals from the same developer that have not passed. The density of this current proposal is still too high. The 25 acres in question are a bit more than a third of the size of the Scenic Hills community that lies adjacent to it, yet the number of rooftops and residents will be nearly equal. Think about that, the same number of people in a third of the space. That is definitely high density, and it is definitely inappropriate to be placed in the middle of existing single-family residences. I've had the opportunity to sit in on some meetings with the developer and their lawyer. I am grateful for those opportunities. I have learned a lot. In those meetings, they have told us how challenging this piece of land is to develop. They have said it's an odd shape, that they can't cut down their numbers anymore because they won't make a profit, and that the land was meant to be a few holes of golf. And I think that last statement says it all. This land and the surrounding community was never planned to accommodate a high-density development. That land was planned for a few holes of golf. Yet here they are trying to develop it anyway. It truly does feel like they are trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. I am sorry for their struggles, I truly am. They seem like very kind people just here doing the jobs they've been hired to do. But the fact is, their proposal is still not appropriate. I ask that you please deny the request for rezoning this evening. If for some reason you decide to approve it, please consider the following. Our wonderful city of Schertz has set up a unified development code that sets the bare minimum standards for developers to follow. The applicant this evening is applying for a PDD so that they have some leeway in following those requirements. They are asking for several variances. Their proposed lot sizes are significantly smaller than a traditional R3 two-family zoning requires. If you decide to recommend this project, please hold them to the standards our great city has set. We are Schertz, and we are better than just the bare minimum, and we're certainly better than granting variances to be below that bare minimum. Being great comes from setting and holding high standards. I want those same standards to be upheld and respected in our neighborhood. Thank you for your time this evening. I hope it is apparent that we are all here because we truly care about our neighborhood. Help us keep it the beautiful, peaceful place that it is. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's okay, you can applaud if you want.
Kate Jackson, 3410 Wimbledon Drive. Good evening, Commission. I have come here tonight to speak on the discovery of a nesting bird species, the chimney swift, on the land with the proposed development, pictured in Figure C of the handout that was given to you. The species is marked by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a bird of conservation concern, or BCC, range-wide, meaning that the bird is protected across the entirety of its natural range across the continental United States and Alaska. I'll be a senior at Steele High School next year. I have many hobbies, one of which is bird watching. I've been bird watching in the area daily since mid-March, and these birds began appearing in the last week of that month, as per Figure B, which are my personal observations. They are currently extremely common throughout the entirety of Northcliffe, and I have proof of their presence should you need to see or hear that proof. These birds are possibly nesting on and around this land, and according to the nationwide standard conservation measure, Section 3, development must be conducted in accordance with what is outlined in that document. In the interest of brevity, I'll paraphrase some of the measures that must be taken. Vegetation removal and land modification must be conducted outside the species breeding season, Section 3.3.1. Surveys must be conducted no more than 5 days prior to development to determine if nests are present, and if so, development must not occur, Section 3.1.2. Construction activities must be limited to the time between dawn and dusk, Section 3.3.1. Bright white light must not be used in the construction site, Section 3.3.5. Entrapment hazards must be minimized, Section 3.5.1. And noise should be kept below ambient levels during breeding season, Section 3.6.1. There are many more measures that must be taken. This is just an overview of those. I mentioned earlier that project development must not occur during the species breeding season. Figure A of the handout, provided by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, lists the species breeding season as March through August. If the surveys prove that they are nesting on this site, development can only occur outside of that window at the risk of illegally disturbing nesting sites. Should this development pass, surveys must be conducted to ensure that the species is appropriately protected. Furthermore, I have evidence of the presence of at least 30 more bird species protected under the Migratory Birds Act of 1918, including the eastern bluebird, Chuck-Will's widow, indigo bunting, and least flycatcher. This information is found under Title 50 under the Code of Federal Regulations. I implore the developer to conduct the necessary surveys and obtain the necessary licenses before attempting to develop the land. Thank you for your time.
Welcome. Else?
Richard Moss, 3434 Wimbledon Drive. Basically, what I want to talk about is going forward. We had a meeting last night with them, with the developer and everything, and went through some different things. And basically, like they were saying, because of the shape of the land, the 87 feet is something they won't get off of. They just won't leave the 87 feet. And if you look at the property and think of it as a spreadsheet, there's 4 columns going down and there's 20 rows, okay? That's basically how it's set up. And that's why they end up with the 56, 55. And then they want 3 variances because of that. They want the lot size both in width and depth. They want the setbacks, and then they also want the impervious coverage. And I would definitely want to see the document on the impervious coverage. When I was at the meeting last night, I was told by the developer's representative that there was a document they had that showed 58%. I would like to see that document and have it included in this. When I looked at the scale model they have, that's not correct. So I would think that since they want to change that number, they should produce a document that actually reflects that. And in looking at this property from the beginning, to me it made no sense mathematically. Very, very simple calculation on this. And I've done, like I said, I've done houses, everything else. It's pretty easy to see. It's 25 acres. Well, it's only 20 acres buildable. Okay, if you build 70% of that, that's 14 acres. Well, a 9,000 square foot lot, you multiply 14 times 5, that's how many lots from the day one that this would support. It was just funny math, or no math all the way along. It just made no sense. I don't know how they came to buy this. It just makes no sense from the math standpoint. And basically, on the second page I have is kind of my go forward. Things that I could see that I think I could live with going forward. The first and foremost is that the PDD is revised correctly, that it shows a list of everything that's a variance. So anybody looking at that document will know what the variances are, first and foremost. Secondly, I would like to have a copy of that impervious cover, and I would like the city engineers to look at it and agree with them on what that number is. Like I said, from the picture they have, that's not true. The next thing is the whole lot width at the 65 feet. And the 65 feet never made any sense because now they went to this funny 0 lot line. Plus then that's where their impervious cover is a problem. And then also that's where all their setbacks are a problem. And then it creates this really weird deal that I was told about last night, that the HOA, which is the diagram I'm showing you, the HOA controls the backyards. So if you live in number 1A, you have no access to your backyard. The HOA controls that. They're more than welcome to explain it better than me. There's a side reference for the B1, and then he would have to come through in between the two into the A1. And I don't think that's legal in Texas. Basically, what they're saying is that the HOA controls that, so if your air conditioner goes out, you call the HOA to get access to your backyard. Again, they're more than welcome to, but how it's explained is underneath here. You know, at the bottom where residential lots have double frontage and all that, to me, it didn't make any sense. And I would think that that should be very clear to everybody how you get into your backyard, when you want to get into your backyard. And then the last thing that I would like to see is there's 2 items that I gave you that are not truthful, that are in the application and should be removed or revised. To me, it makes no sense to go forward with an application that has obviously untruthful things in it. Because they're talking about how many variances they have. There's 3. That was established, but they don't even go into the 3rd one. And then there's a footnote on the setbacks, so you have to dig into to find where that is. It's not really laid out for anybody. And then also the traffic, which we were discussing before, was there's a little map I put on you there. And the little map shows where the project is, and it comes out on Country Club right at Wimbledon. They need to make that a one-way out of there only. No ifs, ands, or buts, with no turnarounds, no anything, to keep people from going in the neighborhood to get to 1103. That the median needs to stop them there, and there has to be signs at each one of the turnarounds that they are not, there is no U-turns. That would eliminate the traffic problem. And I'm not going to take credit for this one. This was an HOA meeting that talked about it. I'm just saying that if they had brought that up the first 2 times, that might have had a chance, because that was the biggest complaint at all the meetings I went to, was the traffic. This would definitely, if that is incorporated into the application, I think would garner a lot more support. But that's what I would like to see. I would like to see the application revised with these items put in there. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? No? No, we can ask questions. Their opportunity.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Laredo Reyes. I live at 3726 Columbia Drive. I don't have any presentations for you today. I know we have a team back here that's been working on things and really kind of getting down to the nitty gritty of it. But one thing that I've noticed with this is that it feels like they're just saying what they think that we want to hear, right? I have a little one at home. I left building a swing set to come up here and try to fight this, because every time we turn around, it's what about the traffic? We already have really bad, people that speed through, and all of these units are going to have a number of families with how many cars? 2, 3 cars each. We're already overcrowded. We already have a hard time getting, around. You do have to go through Chelsea or Columbia Drive to get out to either 1103 or the access road to get to 35, wherever you're heading. It doesn't make sense to put this many people in this small area. The fact that they failed to think about that when they made this purchase, I'm sorry, but it's not our problem. That's not our fault. That's something that should have been considered. Now, you're tasked with looking and seeing, does this make sense for the city? But if you have attended any of the city council meetings, there's a lot of us that are concerned with what's going to happen to our neighborhood. And having lived in the medical center of San Antonio, I know what it's like to be in the middle of everything, and that's not why we moved out here. We moved out here to raise our daughter where it's quiet. We are still able to get to the city if we need to, but dropping this in is going to literally put this in my backyard. So I'm building a swing set, and my daughter's gonna have a view of all of these duplexes that have been crammed into our backyard. I understand that the golf course, didn't make it, but we moved out here hoping to keep a green area, and that's what we're trying to do. And we've heard that it was going to be affordable housing, and now we're hearing that it's going to be 500 to 600,000. I'm sorry, but that's not affordable. So that's why I'm saying it feels like they will say literally anything to appease us. And then speaking with the HOAs, they spoke to one of the three, I think, in the area, and were able to get, whatever deal they made with them, but that's disregarding the rest of us out there. So I don't feel that we're really being heard. And so I'm just asking for you guys to consider that and the implications of what this does to the families that are there. And they don't have any ties to Schertz. They don't have any reason to be concerned with what happens to us. They're gonna do what they were hired to do. They're gonna get on a plane and they're gonna go back to wherever it is that they came from. So I'm just asking you guys to be mindful of our town and the citizens here. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Kristen Wilson. I live at 5006 Tiffany Lane. I recently got my master's in public administration, and I always like to say government is anything but a straight line. And today, this, I feel like, is a great example that government is working for our people to develop the best city we can have. And with that comes change. And I feel like that's something that is being missed by some of the citizens. While this may not be ideal to have in your backyard, and there's concerns about traffic. Most of the traffic in these neighborhoods comes right by my home, and I'm okay with that because 99% of the people are very respectful about driving through our neighborhoods. And while the traffic is bad on 1103, we have processes changing. We're widening our roads, we're working on that. And I think that one thing that needs to be recognized is that variances have a reason because not everything is perfect. And with the UDC, boards of adjustments, all those things have that in place for variances. And I don't think that their variance is that unreasonable. I think that they're trying to make something respectful to our neighborhood. And I think that the developers would be open to doing slight traffic modifications and stuff like that to help with traffic flow. On other arguments I've heard, I understand the concern about wildlife. I understand the concern about having more people. But in general, Schertz doesn't enforce any of that to begin with. So why would we start now? So why are we placing an unfair burden on one developer? So I look at it as we're having to place fair standards for all, and that's my thoughts. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bill Edmonds, 4909 Crestwood Drive. I'm still there. In the paperwork that was submitted, one of the things it says in here is the intent of the development is to conform with the two-family residential districts. And if you go through and look at the paperwork that you have in front of you, they haven't done that. They're asking for variances on everything. At some point, we brought this up last night. We had a meeting with the developer last night. And we brought up the errors, omissions that weren't turned in. We brought up about all the differences that we see on this, especially the impervious land area. And he said, and we asked him, why don't you just table this and, bring it in right so we all know exactly what's going to be there, not what your intent is, but what's actually going to be proposed and done. Why don't you table this? He goes, they talked between themselves for a couple minutes, a couple seconds, and said, no, we're just going to go to the council and see what they, or the, pardon me, planning and development, and see what they do, see what they have to say. So we've tried to work with them. They've made a lot of concessions. I will admit that. They have made a lot of concessions. But they're asking for more concessions that violate the code. At some point, you've got to stand up and say, we have this code. This is what you're supposed to follow. We're not going to give you 7 different variances so you can have your property. We've discussed this with Mr. Buck, or with Buck, and he has said, we've said, what about maybe 170 units or 150? You know, lower it down to where your lot size is bigger. And he goes, we can't make money at that. That's not our fault what they paid for the property, and they can't make money. That's their own fault for not thinking about it in advance before they paid the amount of money they did for it. Thank you.
Anyone? Okay. Once I bang the gavel, close the public input, that's, can't ask questions, can't add comments. Going once, the mayor likes to say going twice. Okay, public input is closed at 6:55 p.m. Just a second here. Commissioners, if you don't mind, before we get started, I'd like to address a couple of things. And we'll start with, why do we do a PDD versus straight zoning? And for one thing, typically we get a better product with a PDD than we do with just straight zoning. I think here a meeting or two ago got a request for straight zoning, but for the most part, the developers come in with PDD. What we get are sometimes more open space, something other than straight line, drag strip, a checkerboard layout subdivision. And the philosophy has always been we give and take. In other words, if we allow you to, and I don't like to call them variances there because that has another connotation together, but I'll use that term. So if we allow them a reduced lot size, my question is always, what's the city getting in return for that? Now, yes, when you look at this PDD, and I understand that the UDC may require a list. I've been on this commission for 6.5 years. Never seen a PDD come in with a list. Typically, it's laid out the way this one is, where it says, here's what the UDC requires, here's what we're asking. Or in a tabular or text form list. That's typical of D. So, and we're not giving away, you know, there are so many other things in the development code. There's street width, there's street design, there's landscaping, there's curbs and gutters and sidewalks. All development code is full of those requirements. The developer is asking no waivers, variances, any of them. I will admit the lot size is a pretty big change or variance to the lot size. I really don't like using it because variances they go to the Board of Adjustment. But I guess the process the city has set up, we address those things as part of the meeting. All right. So I guess the bottom line is typically we get a better development with than we do straight zoning. I have some other things, but I'm going to defer those for now. Commissioners, if you would please, if you'd like to speak, if you push your little RTS button and we'll commence here. The floor is yours. Commissioner Goldick?
I have a question for you. In regards to this backyard access, can you explain that a little bit better for me?
HO, am I good? Okay. The HOA will have easements in the front and backyard. As mentioned in the narrative, the HOA is going to maintain the front, rear, and side yard. So the HOA will have an easement to go back and forth between those lots. So and to the degree something needs to be repaired or fixed, I mean, owners will be able to access that, or the HOA will be able to access that and maintain it. I mean, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but.
Well, is there a small privacy fenced-in area?
Yes,
Okay. The HOA would be allowed to go back into your private area.
and maintain it. There's a growing market of home buyers or renters, if you will, that want their front yards and backyards and side yards maintained. They want to pay a premium for that, so they don't have to do it on the weekends, and that's part of what we're trying to fulfill here. And I mean, I represent a lot of developers and do a lot of HOA work, and that's not an uncommon theme where you have the HOA maintains the front, side, and backyards.
So would an analogy be the utility easement? Or
Yes.
mine is an older home, so they're all in the back, so GBC easement that gives them access to my backyard. Now typically they'll ask first, trump in there. And I think I'm assuming that would be part of the sale agreement.
Yes, sir. And what we see a lot of in those situations is the HOA, you know, if they have a maintenance schedule, people know about that in advance. So if you have a pet or something, you bring it in on those days. So it's not like they're knocking on doors and stuff like that. So that's standard.
Clarify if I remember, part of the zero lot line agreement is that the fences themselves will get the back corner of them. Won't be at the front.
And that's what your fire marshal is required. Yes, sir.
But no side yard. I mean, I did hear that a couple of times. So it's just from the back of the house. The fence that's just off the back. So like this is the house, it goes from here to here.
And then there's, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. And when you say the HOA will maintain, does that include like, they'll go back there and cut the grass? I gotcha. Okay.
All right, Commissioner Ray?
Yeah, one thing that everybody has to remember, HOAs are only as good as the people that own the facilities that are living. And if they're not active with the HOA board, then they get what they expect because they're not giving them any feedback. So if you've got folks that are active with that HOA, I don't see where there's going to be that many problems because they're going to know what the rules are up front.
I think I may add, I mean, this will be professionally managed by a management company like other HOAs would be. Yes, sir. I wanted to make sure, I thought I'd pointed that out in my earlier presentation. I may not have, but it will be managed. It won't be an owner-managed HOA.
My assumption is those fees will be somewhat high. The HOA fees, like a condominium.
Yes.
If they're paying for both front and back and all that maintenance.
And anytime you have an HOA with private streets and a gate, gates are very expensive, and from day one, you have to start building a reserve to repair your streets.
During the pause here, you earlier wanted to kind of get up where you can answer a question for someone. Do you remember?
I did want to add, I did want to say, in terms of the application, and a lot was made about our application and how it was, I'm going to defer to your staff on whether or not our application was complete. They said it was complete. We've worked off that regard. I do believe that there was a impervious cover exhibit in our submission, which has the information that some people have asked, so it's in there. And in terms of traffic, we will be doing, traffic impact analysis. That's not required at this point. It will be required as part of our planning process.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else before I get started? Mr. Brown.
for city staff to save me the trouble of going through the UDC, where does it talk about gated community?
Where does it talk about it? Like the actual code reference?
Yeah.
I think it's in Article 8, I think. Really testing me here, Mr. Bro. But the streets are proposed to be private, but our UDC does require that they are constructed to city standards. So even though they're private streets in a gated community, the roadways would be built to city standard.
Thank you. You can go ahead. I'm going to read.
All right, as always, I make notes. Folks provide comments to me. They make some notes so I remember to address them. Why I talked about the whole bird issue, that's a new one. We haven't heard that before. And so my question is, whose responsibility it is to follow those? You know, it brings back, we got a proposed development several meetings ago down in southern Schertz. And property owners in opposition to the project were pointing out environmental concerns about how it used to be a landfill and some other very concerning issues. Fortunately, as far as that goes, that's not, the city is not responsibility. So I'm kind of wondering the same thing with making sure we don't, well, I'm sure we're going to disturb them, but we don't over disturb the birds. And so I understand the developer or the builder or whoever, you know, is doing the work bears some of that responsibility, but who would they be required, you know, who's going to monitor this whole thing? It's not the city. Yeah, see, Mr. James is sitting in the back there, so who would? I mean, it's a valid point, but who within the state of Texas, I know we've all been reading about the golden cheek warbler up in, you know, in the northwestern parts of San Antonio, but I have no idea where that.
So the federal government would, it's again, as the resident cited, it's their act.
Okay.
So they would. Again, one thing just for where you hear cities or the state have to comply with these things, it's often because there are federal funds involved. So again, the issue with the golden cheek warbler has to do with the military bases and federal funds, and if federal funds are involved. So you may know that when we are doing a project where we are going after funds from Alamo Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, often routed from the federal government, then those requirements kick in. The city does not enforce that. I'm not going to show up at any resident's house when they're out there trimming their trees and go, wait a minute, you're in violation of this federal law. Federal government could. Residents certainly can report them, but that's where you often see it come into play with the city or the state or counties, is when federal funds involved. This is a private development. There aren't federal funds involved.
All right. Thank you, Mr. James. A question for the developer. And this really, it's more curiosity than it is regulatory, but when we look at a duplex, that's 2 living units, is the intent that you have to buy both units, or can somebody come in and buy just one?
You'd buy the lot with both units.
Okay, so then you're automatically setting it up for the rental because I doubt homeowners going to live in both of them, so they might, I guess.
They might. Sometimes they live in one and rent the other.
Maybe the mother-in-law lives in the other one, or the grown, you know, something like that. Okay.
Please, not my mother-in-law. Sorry.
Well, I bring that up, I mean, we saw that in southwestern Schertz, those big lot developments down there, a lot of those big homes, you know, they're, I don't know, 4,000, 4,500 square feet, and they have a separate apartment that, while it's connected and it has a door to the main unit, it's primarily a standalone place for the parents or, you know, that kind of thing. Okay. And you know, relative to size, I assume these are two-story units, correct?
Some two-story, yes.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
okay. You know, when we were talking about the footprint, one of my original objections to your original proposal, and you don't need to stand there, I'm just, you know, was that these fourplexes were huge. And so if you lived in one of the single-family homes behind it, you were just looking at this wall of fourplexes. I think at least a two-story duplex, because based on the square footage in your PDD, the entire building, both units, is somewhere between 2,600 and 2,800 square feet. My house is, it's not a true two-story, it's about a 1.5 story, but it's 2,500 square feet. So now, you know, if we were to come in there and build single-family units, so the duplex, I think, is in the same size, at least the building is in the same size range as a high-end or an upper-end single-family home. You know, we're dealing, we don't have typically we would have 20 feet between these buildings, and now we're down to where we're only going to get 10. But, well, let me move on to these are some personal notes of mine. I was thinking the other day, what we really need, what would really help traffic in the entire North Cliff area is an overpass at Country Club. All right, so how do we justify an overpass at Country Club? Requires traffic. Well, if all the traffic is choosing to go down through Morningside and down to Chelsea, they're never going to be counted out there at Country Club and I-35. So if the state puts traffic counters out there, they're never going to catch the traffic because it's going somewhere else. How do we solve that? I don't know, but I wrote traffic dilemma because that's what we need, but how do we justify it without the cars going that way? Growth is everywhere. Has anyone driven 1103 lately in Cibolo? My goodness, yes. Take 1518, and it's going to get worse in Schertz. You just can't see the developments because they're far enough off 1518. But take 1518 and go across 10. Go south on 1518 from 10 and look at what's going on out there. It's just, it's everywhere. And the lady that was up here, one of the last ones, and she talked about, you know, I've lived in this area. We're coming up on 34 years now, and I've seen a lot of change. And the problem is our infrastructure, both city and state, is not keeping up with that change. But is it fair that just because I'm already here, that I get to say no to this guy because he'll add too much traffic to the road? You know, that's a tough one. You know, when we moved to Schertz, 3009 was 2 lanes. Well, shortly after I moved to Schertz, they widened it to 4. So did I cause that because I bought a house in Savannah Square? I don't know. And the other dilemma is this is the 3rd time we've looked at this project. And it's changed. You know, I think I went back, originally we were talking about 190, 220. And now we're down to possibly 170 or so, somewhere in that, you know, yeah. So, but the question you have to ask, you know, and I've seen it in the comments. A lot of people would like the city to buy that and maintain it as a park. city can't keep up with what they've already got. I mean, that would be ideal if somebody would step up and we kept that as open space. I honestly don't think that's going to happen, or it would have happened by now. So the question you have to ask yourself is, if we don't put this project there, what are we going to put there? Because we're going to put something there. You know, it's not economically feasible for single family because, you know, I have no idea what they paid for the property, but, you know, they're in business to make a profit. So, and apparently, if we just tried to build 50 or 60 homes in there, they're not, you know, it's just not economically viable. So what do you put there? Well, I can almost guarantee you the city would never approve the commercial use for retail. You know, I certainly don't think you want to see multifamily, you know, you don't want to see R4, which are apartments. So I kind of think what we've been working towards is trying to find the best fit. You know, somebody is gonna build something in there. And I've said it before, I wish we had a crystal ball and we could see that if this one doesn't succeed, there's a better one down the road. But of course we can't. You know, I wish I could look ahead and see what the stock market's gonna do, but I can't. So, you know, we try as best we can to find something that, you know, is what we think is the best we're going to get. All right, Commissioner Bro, you come up with something else now? Okay.
Question for staff. In the UDC, it says the minimum acreage for a gated community is 75 acres. How does this one get around that?
So I would say it's part of the PDD.
Is it listed as a variance anywhere?
No, sir. But it is identified that the property would be gated, that it is a gated community, just as similar as it's listed that the lot size, width, and depth is what's being proposed. They're proposing it as a gated community. So as Mr. Outlaw said, I'm not aware of a PDD that we have that bulleted list in a PDD design standard. It's in this narrative format.
2181B1 says minimum acreage requirement for a secure gated community shall be 75 acres. That's a hard requirement.
So I would say we could add that into the PDD design standard to make it clear, but ultimately what is being proposed is that gated community, which is what's identified in the design standards.
Okay. All right, I just stated my fact, that's all.
Well, I think it's a very, it's a valid comment that, again, because we're hearing comments from the residents. So if it, how do I want to put this? If it deviates from the UDC, then it should be noted in the PDD. So if the UDC says minimum of 75 acres, then somewhere in this PDD, it should show that the UDC is this, and we're proposing this, just like the other things they've done, so that we have that transparency. Granted, well, I'll leave it there, you know, but that's the whole thing in PDDs is we're doing a PDD because for some reason the development doesn't fit the UDC, whether that's one thing or 10 things. But again, as has been pointed out, I think anything that deviates from the UDC should be spelled out somewhere in the PDD itself.
So we can make that modification between Planning and Zoning Commission. If the commission decides to move this forward to City Council, we can add that into the PDD design standard, similar to making the correction from the 75 to the 60% in the dimensional requirements, to make it explicitly clear that they're requesting for this to be a gated community, cite the UDC requirement for the acreage.
Well, and then I have to wonder if we've stumbled across this one, what else is, have we?
So I'll say ultimately out of what is being requested by the applicant, they're not requesting any modifications to the street design, to it being designed to city standards. They're not requesting any landscape buffer changes, street tree changes, anything like that. They would meet the street width requirements per the UDC.
All right, let me ask one more question. Maybe one more, maybe there, you never know with me. So, we now have, let me call them modifications to the PDD, one being the impervious cover, and now this one being the minimum acreage. If the commission wanted to postpone this and have the developer make those changes and come back to us, would that require another public hearing?
From my understanding, no, it would not, because you've had your public hearing on this item tonight.
Okay. And we also have the option, we can send this on to city council with those
With the
provisions.
proposed, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, who else has something? Yeah, go ahead.
So I wasn't really clear on the price per unit. Does that include 2 duplexes? So the 550 to 600 would be for both units? Okay. And do you know offhand what the proposed street width is for the properties?
It's going to be the typical city width, which
I believe it's 30 feet.
30 feet?
The right-of-way width would be 30 feet. So that includes the curb, gutter, sidewalk.
Okay, so 30 feet from side to side.
But
Yeah, I think it's 30 feet of pavement, I think.
I think you're right, 50 feet of right-of-way, I believe.
44. I just know we're developing it to what a city.
Yeah, see, again,
The
these are
local
all
street.
details that'll come out in the
As part
plat.
of the plat, yes.
And, but yeah,
Okay.
it's a valid question, and I think if you drive any of the newer well, they didn't even have to be that new. If you come up in my neighborhood, I live on Forsyth Park, and I took the tape measure out there one day, and that's 30 feet of pavement. And that's wide enough. Now, if you park cars on both sides, like a lot of places do, now you're down to about 12 feet, so it becomes a one-way street. But it's still more than wide enough for a fire truck, a garbage truck, a school bus. It doesn't really, other than, sometimes stopping and yielding to somebody coming the other way, it really doesn't cause any issues. And I'm fairly certain that's 30 feet of pavement. And then the right-of-way would include the, depending on how it's done, in my neighborhood, there's that little 3-foot or 2-foot grass strip, and then the sidewalk, so.
And I will say our engineering department and public works department have reviewed a preliminary utility plan, preliminary kind of concept plan to make sure that the street widths would be, and the proposed lot widths would accommodate all the requirements of a city street standard, even though they would be private. They have reviewed that, as well as kind of preliminary entrances off of Country Club and Columbia as well.
And the HOA controls whether or not people can park on the streets?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So the traffic pattern, do we know if going through the neighborhood out to 1103, is there a light at that intersection now?
Yes, at Chelsea, yes.
At Chelsea? Okay. And then for staff, just simply, you know, from your perspective, are the standards being followed to the letter of the law, right? So complete transparency, because I think that's one thing that I'm not necessarily clear on, but from your perspective, for the residents, because I've heard some different points of view or understanding of what's written, UDD versus the PDD, and whether or not the standards are being followed by the developer.
So I'll answer it this way. I would say staff, I know there's been a question on if it was a complete application. Staff did deem this a complete application. That's why it's made it through this process and is here before the commission tonight. And then to go back to Chairman Outlaw's point earlier, staff feels that the written narrative does meet the intent of the list of modifications being requested from the UDC requirements. The narrative does outline that they're requesting the lot width and depth changes, that the area changes, they're requesting that setback change. You know, if the commission moves the item forward, we will get the additions corrected for the 75% and get the addition corrected for the 75 acres. We'll get those modified into the PDD design standards. So there is no question that even though it says that it's a gated community, that it's explicit that the UDC does require 75 acres and they're only proposing 25 acres for that gated community, we can make sure that that's updated. But from staff's perspective, the PDD does meet the intent of the ordinance requirements for what a PDD, and listing out those modifications, it's consistent with what we've done with previous PDDs. Did that answer the question?
No, yeah, no, it does. I guess my only question is that do we typically do that? Make the changes post the application as opposed to making sure that the application meets the standard up front?
So I'll say when we deem an application complete, we do an initial review to make sure that everything has been submitted by the applicant, and that's when we deem the application complete. And then there's a period where staff works with the developer and the applicant. In a PDD sense, we go back and forth with the design standards, making modifications, asking questions, you know, trying to get that give and take that a PDD is. And then once staff feels comfortable with the document, that's when we do the notice and we bring it forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission for, you know, recommendation to City Council.
Okay, so, and this is my last, so as a citizen then, if I were to look and read the UDC for understanding, what would be my takeaway? Is it just a guide? Is it hard and fast standard? Just a proposal?
So I would say the UDC is our rules and regulations. That's what we utilize and enforce during development. But the whole purpose of a PDD is to allow for the applicant to request modifications to those UDC requirements so the city of Schertz can get a unique, better development than if they were going straight zoning. If the applicant had requested straight, you know, R3 in this case, they would be bound to the R3 standards and everything else identified in the Unified Development Code. But they're requesting these modifications to the UDC requirements to try to make that more unique, better development, which is what the PDD is.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Ms. Delgado.
And if I understood part of what you said there, if we choose to send this forward with these modifications, those modifications will actually be made to the PDD document before it goes to City Council.
Yes, sir.
It won't go as is with our recommendation that they modify these things. Is that correct?
So the document that goes to City Council will include those modifications.
Okay.
And then our staff report and our memorandum to City Council will note that those changes were made between Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council based on P&Z's recommendation.
Anyone else? ahead, John.
For the developer on your price point, is it, the number you gave out, I think it was 550 to 600, is that per unit or per building?
Per building.
Per building?
Yes, sir.
So if I want to just buy one of the units, how do I do?
You couldn't buy just one unit. You'd have to buy the lot with both units on.
Okay, so I buy one building with 2 units.
Sure. Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Commissioner Carbone, did you have comments or questions?
Just some comments. First, I want to thank the residents for coming out. Anytime you exercise your rights as a citizen, we appreciate you. And we appreciate your time and your Mr. Buck, I know we've seen you 3, 4 times. Yes, so I appreciate you working with residents. Obviously, you've made some compromises, and that's what civics is all about. So I think one of the residents talked about it. I think Mr. Outlaw talked about it. It's that sincere effort to give and take. So I wanted to say thank you for that. I've seen it actually happen in real time as you've come back multiple times with your application. Besides that, I'm ready to vote.
Anyone else? All right, this is one of those issues where we make a recommendation to City Council. And we have, I think, 3 basic choices. We can send it forward recommending approval. We can send it forward recommending denial. You can repeat that first one. We can send it forward recommending approval with these 2 modifications that we've discussed. We can, the correct word is postpone, not table. We could postpone this, asking the developer to make those modifications and bring it back to us. So those, I think, are kind of our choices this evening. Commissioner Hector?
Yeah, so real quick, Mr. Buck, just had one final question. Can you help us understand why each individual unit is not allowed to be purchased by an individual versus the entire building?
Well, you can't have a separate legal, you would have to have a separate legal description. I mean, the individual units would have to be like platted separately.
Okay.
Because you couldn't convey just the building itself. You'd have to, I mean, it's hard, I'm not drawing it, but you'd have to split the duplex right in half, and it would be each individual lot. That's why you can't.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it can be done. Well, I'm assuming it can be done in Texas. My sister in California, she used to live, they didn't call it a duplex, they called it a townhouse, okay? But basically it was a duplex with a firewall down the middle, and she owned one half and her neighbor owned the other half. Anyway, it's really, I don't know how, it's a good question. It's a nice educational curiosity question. I don't know that it has a lot of bearing on whether you approve or deny, because, you end up with 2 units, whether it's owned by one person or 2. So, well, it is. It's a good question. And we haven't, here in Schertz, we haven't dealt with townhomes. It seems to be either apartments or single family. So this is the whole duplex thing is relatively new. I think you can find a handful of them in the older neighborhoods over here in like Aviation Heights or what, the older part of Schertz, but this is something new for us. So, Commissioner Goldick?
I was just going to say that these duplexes are actually somewhat common around the United States, and they're purchased just like he mentioned. You share one roof, one wall, have 2 units. I know veterans that have purchased these types of units and live in one side and rent out the other. You can use your VA loan and other types of financing, but they are more common around the country. I've actually lived in one myself in my 20s.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I make a motion to recommend approval with the 2 conditions of PLPDD 20230093, the 2 conditions with the proposed changes to the PDD concerning the gated community and the impervious coverage.
Okay, I have a motion to recommend approval with the 2 modifications for impervious cover and minimum acreage on a gated community. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have that motion was made by Commissioner Goldick, a second by Commissioner Ray. Any further discussion? All right, I ask you to record your vote, please. Okay, I have showing 6 votes. If you'll publish that vote, please. We're not seeing it out here. There you go. Thank you. So we have 5 in favor and 1 opposed.
And then Chairman Outlaw, if I can just ask Commissioner Hector, if you can please provide a statement on why the nay vote, so I can include that in the memorandum for City Council for their records.
Yeah. Me verbally?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, and it could be just me, but I am not really tracking with what could be construed as the lack of transparency between how it's written in the UDC can be adjusted in the PDD. So I think as a concerned citizen, I would just want to know that that's clearly defined, and maybe it's just me again, but I did not believe that it is. Nothing against. I am certainly a huge proponent for the need to change and also to provide different types of housing, as well as affordable housing within the Schertz community. So I'm not opposed to that. I just think that as citizens of the community, it should be transparent. And I would have thought that that would have been considered up front, opposed to later.
That's perfect. Thank you, Mr. Hector.
Thank you.
And real quick, Emily, do you have a projected date for the council agenda?
Tentatively scheduled for July 18th, City Council meeting. And then the public hearing, notice will be published in the newspaper prior to
Okay.
that council meeting. And it'll also be published on the website as well. So if you go to Schertz.com, it's on the front homepage, kind of at the bottom, scrolling news flash. It'll be updated there as well.
Okay. So tentatively July 18th, but you can check the city website for the actual date. All right, thank you, Emily. All righty, moving on. You want me to take a break? You folks, we've got 5 minutes left if you just want to sit still for a few minutes, or I'll give you a chance to, okay. Item 7A, request by commissioners to place items on a future planning and zoning agenda. Anybody? I will tell you, we still have 2 items pending. One is a workshop on the bylaws, the rules and procedures, and can't remember what the other one is. Oh, the public hearing notice signs, yes. Their staff is aware of those. They're just trying to find the right agenda to drop those on. Okay, 7B, any announcements by commissioners? Anybody have anything? Announcements by city staff, anything this evening? No new site plans or nothing, huh? Okay. And item number 8 concerns is the information that's in your packet on our current projects and city council status update. Item number 9, it is 7:41 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.